Welcome, everyone. and Good morning from Boston and the world of Saul Steinberg. It's an absolute joy just to share his work with you and to have it in the gallery. Liz, who's worked with us for many years, pointed out to me that it probably is not a great idea to schedule two exhibitions of artists who have died, because most of their colleagues aren't around either, and so fewer people come. But I must say that for both artists, in very different ways, we've had a wonderful response, and I'm grateful for that. Normally, I try to collect quotes from Brother Thomas's prolific writing around spirituality and art, and then intersperse them with the conversation that we have. So, having gone through about 360 quotes, I found two. And then I realized that these two artists approached the universe in such diametrically different ways, both creative, both in many ways astonishing in what they did, but both with a very different inner mechanism that enabled them to help us as the viewer and as the recipient of their genius experience life differently. So welcome to the universe of Saul Steinberg, an absolute joy to share it with you. I'm going to begin with a quote of his that I think will help us understand everything else. In the end, he was content that he had become what he wanted to be. Quoting him, "I am the writer who draws." And so as we look at each of these images, think about not only him as a writer and a storyteller, but also as an observer of the human condition. So we'll begin with the cover piece of the catalog, and an extraordinary piece that we will, in fact, at the end of the conversation, end to analyze it more thoroughly. But keep the general in mind. Look carefully at it now. You'll see him again. It's a very demanding image in so many ways. So we're going to begin with a wonderful piece, I think, in any event. Let me just add as a brief note that over the last probably 15 to 18 years, having begun to buy his work, we've probably collected over 50 pieces of his. This is out of an oeuvre of 7,000 works. 3,000 of his drawings were given to Yale, along with 250 rubber stamps. And we'll certainly acknowledge the rubber stamps as we go through many of these pieces. I want to thank Rusty, actually Mara and Caroline, for joining in this conversation to add their perspective. And I'm going to ask Mara if you would just begin by responding to his still life, Rubber Stamps #1 from 1966.
There, got my button off.
Great.
The first thing that strikes me about this piece is how incredibly well informed it is by art history. Steinberg, you will notice as we go through, was quite the art historian. And so in addition to his comments on life, he's also commenting on art history. And so this piece really, particularly because it has this collaged feeling to it, part of it's because the rubber stamps are something that are not by his hand. He's employing them in a certain way as you would maybe a collaged element. He has this wonderful calligraphic section in here, which is nonsense, but it's beautifully rendered calligraphy as if it were a personal letter that had been collaged onto the page. And then this whole idea of a simultaneity of form, that you're looking at boxes from the perspective of above, below, an isometric drawing, the side of an ear, the side of a teacup, the top of a teacup, all piled on together. So it reminds me very much of the kind of cubist collages of the very early period of collage in the early 20th century. So you're talking 50 to 60 years before he was making this piece. And part of why I respond that way, particularly to Hermetic Cubism, is he's got this light color, the brown, the side of the brown crayon, the dark brown, the navy blue crayon, the side of the navy blue shadowing. So it has almost a painterly feeling, but a very restrained palette. And then, of course, this wonderful sugar pot or teapot in the background with a little sailor or an auntie with a funny hat on. I'm not sure if it's male or female. So the ambiguity of what the story is, and that the story is everything all at once.
Absolutely wonderful. Let's look at the Picasso Cubist piece, and then we can see it side by each, because it, as Mara was saying, his awareness of and interest in art history is profound. But what a lovely sense of a parody of what had been done and what became extremely famous and important. He also juxtaposes the collaged area on the right-hand side as you're looking at it with these columns that are actually rubber stamps. So look carefully at the 9 little rectangles and then the ones above to realize that he's going to be using these rubber stamps in a creative, a productive way in virtually almost all the pieces that we'll be looking at. Let's go back to it, and then Rusty, if you have some comments, I'd love it. To the full image, that's it.
It's certainly, I think Mara said, it's really a wonderful explication of it. The rubber stamps are so interesting in how he uses them and creates depth. I mean, you usually think of it as a very flat, like the rubber stamps up above on the left-hand side are the typical sort of flat appearance, but what he's able to create geometrically below that is really quite unique. And I think it's a very, he uses just a little bit of color, and you'll see that in other of his prints. And it's not that he's coloring them, it's just all these little tiny embellishments add to the intrigue, if you will, of what his image creates. There's also all that writing you see, and we'll talk more about that, but it's mostly just gibberish. But all these things almost pluck a string in your intellectual thought process to stimulate. Oh, what is that? Oh, well, let me see it. And it brings in some engagement. And then after enough of those happen, you get an overall sort of effect, which is the effect, I think, Bernie, that you feel as you see this piece. But it is a combination of multiple, very intentional manipulations that work beautifully together.
I just wanted to alert everybody to the pieces that I've chosen to buy for the gallery. Almost all exhibit his virtuosity as a drawer. And so essentially, when he talked about himself as someone who does draw, these are extraordinary drawings. And then the visual balance, I love being able just simply to see it on the screen at a size and scale that my eye is comfortable with, to realize that there's rhythm in it, there's the shapes and forms, and it just feels like everything in it is in the right place. His signature down below, Steinberg 1966, is accompanied by one of his rubber stamps. And as I understand it, the rubber stamps derived from his difficulty with immigration in 1944, trying to get into this country. And you'll see many of those rubber stamps as we go on. So the next piece is one that we recently got. It's really quite an extraordinary thing, and enabled me to reread Gogol's The Short Story, The Nose, just briefly. It is a clerk who wakes up one morning without his nose, and you go through the day with him. So it's a really quite remarkable story itself. And then if you think about yourself as a creative individual, how would you then create a drawing or a painting based upon that story? And here you have it. And there's just this extraordinary rhythmic calligraphy throughout the entire piece. So, Rusty, your thoughts about it?
Well, the Gogol story, The Nose, actually has an identity and goes on to develop a certain amount of achievement that the actual person doesn't. The nose on its own overachieves what the individual, and then ultimately becomes reattached. And Shostakovich did an opera called The Nose that is a wonderful, wonderful piece of music, I think. I love it. And other people have done things around the nose. You think about what the nose provides, and it's really a big, big piece of your identity. who are you? You know, you people, if you have a big nose, you have a big nose, a small nose, but it's a major part of your face. And obviously when it's removed, there's a huge absence. So how does Steinberg decide to represent the not normal nose, the absence of a nose, and it's this calligraphy, which in some way it's sort of who is the nose, and the nose is this almost musical script, if you will, in some way. But I think it has something to do with identity and whatever that line is, that continuous line that he's created, has a lot to do with personal identity.
Mara, your thoughts?
Well, I'd like to talk about the difference in the drawing of the head, the eye, the ear, the chin, and the nose. So the nose has spun off in an incredibly creative fashion. The nose in the story goes on to achieve great things. And the human head, the person who used to have the nose and once again will have the nose, has this very strong, very blocky, very straightforward cross-hatching, as opposed to this dancing personality on the other side. So the clerk, or the clerk, as the British would say, the clerk was a pretty buttoned down functionary, and his nose goes off and creates great things. There is that feeling of music or musicality. So it's really two different personalities. The head is one personality with this complete, not only the nose, but the sinuses carved out. And then the whole resonating chamber goes off and dances away. So I think that both sides of the personality are represented by the quality of line that Steinberg has chosen.
That's a lovely insight. And we'll see in the North Carolina piece his continuing use of the cross-hatching, as his training in Italy before he came here was in architecture. So it's almost as if he's using it as an architectural rendering. In addition, just enjoy, I'm sure, the pleasure he had in drawing the ear of the human whose nose is dancing. Let's move on to the next piece. So that was 1964. We're back to 1946. And one of the joys of working with Steinberg's works over these many years is that almost all the pieces that we've gotten have been dated. And it's not a question of evolution of style. It's one of the issues that we frequently are asked in terms of Samuel Bach's work, that after 66 or 67 until today, he's worked approximately in the same style. But what one does within that style is absolutely extraordinary. So here we're back 18 years, 2 years after he had finally gotten into the country, and presenting these rather amazing bird women, each one with their own personalities defined by their decorations, if you will. And so, Mara, would you be willing to talk a bit about the ladies?
I totally want to be a society lady. This makes me really want to be a society lady. I want to have a tiara. I want to have feathers. I want plumes to embellish my hair or I mean, wouldn't it be fun to be in this era? I think so. So you have just every body type possible for a society lady. They're all in their formal wear. They are all embellished beyond belief, you know. Almost Marie Antoinette on one end, and you've got a Jane Austen hero on the other end, the tall, thin empire style dress versus the one with the bustle and the hubbub. But again, it's very, very playful. Everything about it is playful. It's light, and yet there's a tellingness about what class of women these are and what kind of snobbery is inherent in this class, and what kind of competition there is in terms of women and women's clothing and women who look at women's clothing. So it's an era that's largely bygone now for us, but it was still in 1946, just right after the war. Society is, restarting itself. Rationing is still here, but in New York City, going to the opera when the opera reopened, this is how people dressed to go to the opera, not just opening night, every night. So here you have somebody who's finally is an immigrant, from the war years, seeing the finery and the frippery of New York society, really.
Amazing, amazing. Caroline, your thoughts about this?
Bernie, before you go,
I'm not going.
I went to the Boston Symphony Gala last night. I'm not sure it's all gone.
Yeah, I was going to mention it, but then I thought better of it. You go ahead.
No, it's just that these are all the same, and yet they're all different. I mean, it's a wonderful way of individualizing each one, and then the whole idea. We'll see dogs and other kinds of animals, birds and things that Saul uses in his work, but they anthropomorphize very nicely into some sort of unique person that we all recognize in society. It's not any individual. Nobody you would necessarily say, oh, that's Mrs. So-and-so, but the sort of sense of it that he's able to capture, give them each something different, and yet keep them all the same. It's just a wonderful combination.
Well, I think it's in part the lack of color unifies them, even though they're so diverse. And I think it's that removal of the color, which just completely negates that whole dimension, which flattens them in that, not morally, but it flattens them in that regard and keeps them uniform while being so different.
There's also the sort of negative positive in terms of the drawing. Look at their feet in each one of them. So they're just little strokes, but they all seem to carry the weight of the figure above them. And then the dresses, of course, the whole ability. I just did the math. He was 32 years old when he drew this. And I just got a phone call from someone who knows a young person who's a breakout artist, is the phrase, in New York. And the whole idea that Steinberg literally lived his life making art. And breakout or not breakout, he continued to create, I think, drawn masterpieces, one after the other. This certainly just tickles me in so many ways. So let's move on to another assemblage of people from, well, again, 19 years later. And one of the things that I realized in trying to find quotes of Brother Thomas is that they don't apply, because Steinberg is looking into the fundamental vanities of the people that he has drawn. And so here you go with this opportunity to call, I think they're called conditioned reflexers, also a made-up title for people at an art exhibit. And Rusty, would you like to introduce us to the characters?
Oh my goodness. Well, again, there's the dog that I mentioned previously. She's in a miniskirt in 1965, and Mara pointed that out the other day. But these individuals are staring at something, and it's quite easy to assume they're at a gallery, maybe, and looking at a painting. But who knows? They could be in a museum. They could be looking out a window, for all we know. But it looks more like they're looking at something that's giving them something back. And they're sort of vacuous stares. They're just, bug-eyed and looking. You don't get a sense that they're getting anything in return, particularly. And so it's, again, as you mentioned, Bertie, sort of a comment on who are these people. There's a very large head next to the dog and other individuals that are, sketched out. But overall, it's their approach. It's mostly in their eyes, to be honest. If you look at this, their faces that give you the sense of how one would interpret this this composition, what's really going on. The person in the front is sort of looks like Statue of Liberty-esque with a head kind of thing, but things coming out. So they're sort of dressed up. Look at the spiked heels, incredible high heels. So it's the kind of folks you think might show up at an opening for an art gallery. And I think he's making fun of it to a great extent. he does a wonderful job, and Bernie, you pointed this out, of adding a little color. The dog's dress is blue, and there's some little orange in it. So he just, again, it's the details of the dog's eyes, for instance, or as I said, the person up front's head. These are all little details that draw you in, that are beautifully done, and without them would be a far less interesting composition. We've got a close-up of some of his writing, which you see around the ankles of that woman. We can see that after a bit. Yeah, so this is his writing, and it is nonsense. I mean, it's not meant to make any sense at all. It's simply comments, and so in some ways you can read into it whatever you want, because there are no words there. It's just a comment that's being put in. But he does this a lot, just to say, oh yes, people have opinions. Do they really matter? What's really the content?
Let me ask a question, Mara, for you to think about as we go back to the image. Where does this come from in terms of the creative process? Because this is not an observed moment of 5 or 6 people looking at a painting.
Oh, so I think it is an observed moment.
But it's transformed.
It's transformed, but, what I'd like to draw is their postures. There's the person looking closely, intently. There are the people who are very stern, like, okay, I'm curious. But I feel as though everybody here knows they're in an art gallery or museum, and they know there are other people observing them being in an art gallery or an institution, and they're posing in the art gallery or the institution. Because I think it's particularly the dog's eyes with the little circles, like, I don't know what I'm looking at. Whoa, 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 whoa. And the other people are a little bit of a frown. And it's also, I think Rusty said something about the Statue of Liberty. I see a Deco building, the Chrysler building, and the embellishment that really relate to his training as an architect. I feel like the figure behind the squat man with the huge head, the big belly, and the huge foot is almost like an Olmec head sitting there, but transformed into this cartoon character. That I feel the Trojan horse kind of quality of the necks of the rear figures that you're sitting there, and this very society matron face with the marcelled hair right at the top. You only really see her face. But I feel as though they're all playing a role in what it looks like to look at a painting in a public display.
I think it's absolutely.
I think it's performative.
And he imposes the way he sees them on the people who are doing it, so that we're invited into this world that he's experiencing the way he sees it. And it's a real gift. And yet, I guess I keep thinking about in quotes, people used to call the creative process. Did he go to this exhibit and came back and decided this is the way he's going to portray it? Did this just occur to him? What is the process that none of us know that he went through, but he clearly had in mind? And you can't kind of mess up on these surfaces. You're not going to erase too much about as you go through. If you're working in ink, it's just really, really an extraordinary creation in and of itself. Let's move on to...
The good news, Bernie, in 1965, at least they were looking at the art.
And there was art to look at.
Correct.
Both are the same. So this is much, much later. It's another 22 years later. And it's one of the sort of optical approaches he uses. Many of you who are listening and know his 9th Avenue in New York, and then the rest of the world goes off into the distance, but it is based upon the foreground. And here he's at a town in California that also hosts a major festival, but it clearly is from his optic and no one else's. So Rusty, a thought about it?
Well, let me give you the history of what I know. St. Gennaro is a patron saint of Naples. It's the festival in New York City, the Italian festival, sometimes goes by the name of Saint Gennaro. So I think he liked the word Saint Gennaro. I think there is no town in California called Saint Gennaro. So this is some mixture of his exposure, maybe in Little Italy, who knows where, and then his travels, because he traveled all over the country. And this looks very much like L.A. If you look out where the city seat is in L.A., but there's no hill like this in L.A. at all. If you have to get away from downtown to find any hills. So this is an amalgam of his being different places and having different thoughts. But what he's then done is an incredible way of putting together vistas that as you go down the hill has one perspective, as you then get into the flat and go further out as a further perspective. So it's his architectural prowess. And then I mean, what's so wonderful is that beautiful, huge car coming up the hill, again, sort of anthropomorphized with eyes and a big face. And then the people that are going up and down the hill and the dog. It's just, and then as you get further out, as you said, Bernie, that wonderful New Yorker cover, everything has a different perspective. And so it's a wonderful compilation of skills and history for Steinberg from the various things that I think influenced his life.
Totally agree. Mara, your thoughts?
Well, his training as an architect is so apparent here. Just the way he's forcing the perspective, the attention to architectural detail, the sort of isometric lifting of certain parts of the drawing, and angles, and just how he captured, there's the Beaux-Arts building with the big cupola down at the bottom. There's some sort of a monument with a broken column at the very, bottom of the hill thrusting out. The different pediments, the different architectural embellishments, the very modernist building on the right versus the older buildings with more architectural development. What fascinates me about this picture is his use of color. It is just sublime. So the line drawing, is of course the number one thing about a Steinberg is his use of line. But when you see the introduction of color into like this, it's almost Japanese, the way he's using color, ink and faint color. So you have the toning of the buildings in this sort of tan, yellowish, melting, buttery color. All of the shadows across the entire thing, from the front of the page all the way sweeping back, the underneath of the balconies are all in this very delicate shadowed blue. It's just a beautiful introduction of color, not too much. The green, that one spot of green on the copper cupola, but then the weight of the human beings and the shadow of the human beings throughout, all the way down to the bottom, to the tiniest little specks down at the bottom. Their posture has a weight to it, the weight of going down a hill, balancing yourself, aggressively coming up, up a hill. The wind that it's going to take and the balance that it's going to take for the human being there, and then the shadow anchoring the whole thing. It's just, there's so much, it's deceptively simple, but there's so much nuance in this image. It's magnificent.
It really is.
Just for fun, look at all the different drains in the top of this. Each one is different. The ones in the curve on both sides. That's amazing.
Well, I was looking at the trees, actually. There are 3 of them that are elaborately designed like pretzels. And then he's very carefully colored them in with a colored pencil. It would seem to me, and it's just, again, a projection, there must have been a great deal of joy for him in making something like this. First outlining, as Mara said, and then the joy of making decisions about the shadows and the blues overlapping into the street on the left-hand side of the street. The cars, the people, the visual rhythm of the black dots going through the entire piece. It's just really quite extraordinary. And at the same time, it makes me have a sort of inner laugh. There's a sense of quiet humor in it for me. Let's look at the next piece. So, Carolyn, you looked up the names for us, and if you want to start speaking a bit about it, especially the decoration of I guess, the railway station on the right, and then the access to it on the left.
Well, I did. Yeah, I did look up Dinas, but I'm not going to try to pronounce Maudi, maybe.
Okay.
And it's a small village. They did have a railway that was used for slate, to bring out of the quarry and send down rail. And I think eventually it might have been used for the war effort, but it did become. I'm not sure if any of this is directly correlated to what he saw, because there's no decorative building associated with it. There's no big overhang walkway. So I think maybe what he is getting with this title and putting those words in is kind of diverting your attention and bringing you back to, so much of his work, as I'm seeing it now, it's a calling you to consider your own condition as you're looking at it. And he pares the image down so much to kind of draw you into that. And this one's unique in that it's so heavy on the right. It's so balanced strongly that way. But all you're looking at is this beautiful nonsense in a way. It's enjoyable, but I think what he's calling is more to consider what does that bring out in the viewer? What does that bring out in your own thoughts? And then pair it with this very industrial, walk up the stairs overhang, as so much of us who have lived in Boston have had to navigate.
Fabulous. Rusty?
Oh, what an amazing drawing. I am drawn to the more decorative building on the right, both because of the color and because of the intensity of the construction of it. Just sort of fun to look at the shapes in that building with the heavy black lines. So if you say in the middle, there's an archway that is Islamic almost, and yet there's curved archways above it and to the left. And then you look at windows, and they're pentagons, and then they're rectangles, and so much of this is so incredibly geometric, and yet, for instance, the top right-hand side of the roof stops. It doesn't, where the left-hand side has an overhang. There are these sort of points where you think you're lulled into saying, "Oh, this is wonderful. It's repetitive. And then suddenly it stops or it changes or there's something different." So there's no ability just to sort of say, "Oh, what a beautiful thing." It's amazing. It's intricate, and again, pulls you in. I think the real success of an artist is to bring you into an artwork, and then you can start exploring yourself as you're a part of that artwork. The little man with the big suitcase off to the left of that, again, little man going up the stairs, little people, very big buildings, very big structures, and sort of a sense of where we are as humans with all these structures. But the overall effect, finally, with the way the tracks go, this is, I mean, photographers do this, lots of artists do this, that sort of fading track into the distance. But again, it's a powerful little piece of this magnificent small drawing of, there is something that goes way beyond out there, and yet we're in the here and now, and the here and now is more up front right, and on the left, off you go. So it's just a wonderful combination.
It's also interesting to think it's 52, so it's just a few years after the war. And all these areas of the British Isles were in one way or another affected by the war in a dramatic way. So for him to have obviously gone there at this time, I assume, and then drawn this. I do also want to acknowledge the great help of Sheila Schwartz, who is by far the world's leading expert on Saul Steinberg. And each time after the first misstep on my part to buy Steinberg drawings from an auction house in Europe and put them up on our website, and got an email saying, "Those are not his." And I said, "Excuse me? This is one of the world's best known, most established auction houses. Can't be wrong." She said, "Take them down." So then I got in touch with the auction house, and they refused to refund the money. and to acknowledge any complicity in selling fakes until we had a lawyer write a letter and then they refunded the money. So ever since that moment, anything that I'm looking at of Saul Steinberg's goes through Sheila, and I'm eternally grateful to her, not only for that, but for the knowledge of the background of virtually every piece that we have been able to acquire. So thank you so, so much for your wonderful help. On to the next one. Again, one of the things that Steinberg enjoyed doing was getting in his big car and driving around this country. And then obviously shouldn't waste an opportunity to create drawings and watercolors as he went. So this is 3 years later. This is 55, and he's in North Carolina. And Mara, welcome to North Carolina.
Not a place I've traveled widely. However, I was born right around this year. I'm not saying quite what side of it I was, but right around this year, so you can guess my age. When I was young and growing up in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and then later moving to Cape Cod, there were a lot of these buildings I always noticed that looked like an old-fashioned stage set from a Western, because they have this kind of really funny, thin, it's not really a pediment, it's almost like a false wall top, that were just everywhere, and how a Rexall drug would be set into the side with this kind of funny little notch that you see here. And in between buildings, these modern Sunoco stations were like shoved into this little pre-manufactured building that would just slot into a corner like this. So you had the big lot, so you could drive your big cars in and get them serviced. And there used to be little flags that they would fly over gas stations. So this is really just quintessentially mid-century America to me. It's what I remember as a little girl, and he's obviously driving around in his big car in a country he's only been in for 10, 12 years. The automobile culture and the sort of Wild West pediments, and these large billboards. I remember large billboards my whole life up on top of things. Conley owned most of the ones in Boston. Was Conley is the company that owned them. And just how exquisitely the cross-hatching rendering of this. He's clearly an architect. He's clearly, I froze. He's clearly got an architect's eye. His sense of space, the height of the building to the billboard, to the human beings that are sort of shadowed in at the bottom. It's sort of an unerring eye for the details about what the urban scape looked like.
I just love it. And also, after we saw the couple of figures in the train station, look again at these little, so they're really not, and even in the San Gennaro, they're just the indication that people are present. Many of you know the works of Allie, who work in fabric, and many of her figures are also these minuscule little pieces of overlaid of fabric, but they are not significant, and yet they create a depth of field, a placement of individuals and of shadow within the piece itself. Rusty, your thoughts?
I would echo what Mara said. I think that cross-hatching and the perspective is just wonderful here. The way, much like the San Geronimo painting, the perspective as you go down the street, either way, when you're there at the corner and just looking both ways, like, am I going to cross the street? Blatt's beer, I think, is still around. I drank some when I was in college. I know that. Sunoco is around. So it's funny that these are identifiable. He doesn't use too often the identifiable labels. They're usually abstracted. But here, he didn't. The name of the drugstore is not there. It's just generic drugs. So it's not a CVS, or there weren't them in North Carolina anyway. But it's I agree completely. You feel somehow he captures the sense, and it could be North Carolina, it could be Iowa, it doesn't have to be, but it's certainly not Boston, it's certainly not New York, it's definitely Midland America, the sort of emotion of sitting, on one side of the street and just looking at the scene. And he does it so, with pen and ink. I mean, and watercolor again, the sun, the shadow, the cross-hatching, different than the blue. He didn't put any blue in here, but the cross-hatching is the shadow. And the sun is coming mostly, apparently, from the left-hand side. The front of these buildings are all totally colored without any cross-hatching, but in the dark and on the other sides, the cross-hatching becomes a shadow and makes the perspective work.
Also, as you're pointing out that sort of sunlit side, look at the rhythm of the fire escape on the front of the building. It's really probably a nice looking building, but you have to get out in case there's a fire. And on the right, the water container tucked up on top of it. So the space is defined by the objects that he sees, and then it becomes a work of art from his perspective. Let's move on to a rather rare occurrence in his life. Apparently, according to Sheila, he did not do many commercial commissions, but in this case, somehow from this company called Lewin Mathis Copper Piping, he was commissioned to do drawings for advertisements. They created copper pipes. So we have here the organist, essentially, very, very actively playing the organ, and then someone off to the right with a little triangle dinging along. And I don't know if it'll show up. Do you have it? Oh, we do have it on the next slide, the ad itself. So enjoy the notion that Steinberg created the drawing and then they superimposed behind it, or vice versa, the drawing on the copper pipes. But what a wonderful combination, both from the point of view of the company that's selling it, or asking him to do this to help them sell it, and then the one on the right, which we'll look at in a minute, or we can look at now, with the figure, and the figure's halo is created by one of their copper pipes. So just to introduce the piece and then to ask Mara to talk about both of them. This is a nice way to juxtapose them because we ended up buying them together.
They're fabulous. They are fabulous. I think that both the drawing, the hands really, and then just the triangle in the drawing itself, not the advertisement. There's only a very faint line where the pipe, the photograph of the pipe was going to be superimposed. I draw you back to the collages of Picasso in the beginning, that this as an advertisement was conceived to then be collaged and then be reproduced. So, it's just this kind of very playful way of like dancing across art history over a half a century,
right.
Bringing the bits and pieces of advertising, cigarette packs, et cetera, made their way into the collages of the beginning of the century. And this time he's taking a drawing and superimposing the advertisement to create the ad itself. But there's the underlying artwork of the ad. It's sort of a fascinating reverse on art history for me. But again, it's the economy of means. This man is in white tie and tails because there's a swallowtail at the bottom, covering the seat. It's a very elaborately, the wood has been carved at the two corners of the keyboard, and the frenzy of playing with the hands, sort of allows you to imagine the sound coming out of these copper pipes by Lewin Mathis. There's sort of a grandness implied with a silliness and an economy of means that's quite extraordinary.
Absolutely wonderful way to look at it. Emerita, do you want to talk about the figure with the angel's wing, the two birds, and the halo?
Again, I want to quote Paul Klee, who talked about drawing as being taking a dot for a walk or taking a line for a walk. I mean, imagine the simplicity of this drawing, which is simply taking a dot and making an image from it, and then adding the two little birds, making it an angel with wings, wonderfully matching an ear that has more in it than you might expect with the simplicity of glass. I mean, it's just it takes a lot of chutzpah, I would assume, to be able to say this is going to work. Most people look at it and say, well, that's what, so what? But it's really a phenomenal, emotional, pleasant sort of an image that he has made with a ink drawing. So superimposing the copper pipe in both of these situations makes the copper pipe dramatically important. The pipes for the organ, the triangle, and now the halo, they really, by having this image be a very simple but also wonderful black and white image, and then superimposing, as an advertisement, it's a brilliant concept of saying, the strongest, most important part of this is the copper pipe. On the other hand, the complement of this type of drawing makes it work.
Just as a little irreverent note, I would point out that there are 4 hairs on his head that somehow give a dimensionality to the whole figure of the outline of the head, and it gives it life in such an extraordinary way. On to the next piece, which when it arrived, the label on it actually called it Heroes and a Giant Rabbi. They had left the T off of the rabbit. But it seems to be okay either way for me, because there is this kind of what does this all mean? And I have absolutely no clue what it means. But I just love the quality of the drawing of the rabbit, of the knights attacking somehow the rabbit, the rainbow, and then this enigmatic angel above. So I'm more than anxious to hear, Mara, how you view this, and then Rusty.
Well, I love the juxtaposition of the drawing styles in this. These knights, I mean, they could be knights, just going to war with a giant rabbit. Right. But the scale of them to the scale of the rabbit really makes me feel that I'm in a child's bedroom, and I've got my little miniature knights. Having just come back from Malta, there are a lot of knight statues, and in Germany, tiny military, like the size of my glass right here, highly detailed toy soldiers, going from medieval knights all the way up to 20th century G.I. Joe type of figures. But the metal ones that were made and painted in Germany are exquisite, and that's what these remind me of, are the metal ones made and painted in Germany. Sort of a child's toy for adult men, really, I think. And they are like, their horses are galloping, and their lances are down, and their swords are up, and their flags are flying, and they're in full tilt mission to basically the Velveteen Rabbit. And this Velveteen Rabbit, his nose is twitching, his sort of hackles are up, he's got sort of a ruffled back there, like, okay, they're coming to attack me. His eyes are wide. And there's an angel looking over, I don't know, the troops going into battle, and the rainbow of happiness over the rabbit itself. But again, it's this sort of childlike delight in putting these contrasts together that show this puckish sense of humor that Saul had.
It really is so nice to be able to superimpose our responses to his work on his personality and not even having known him. So it's a privilege. Rusty?
Well, I agree. I think it's sort of an anti-military painting for sure, because these are diminutive, incredibly intricately drawn, but diminutive sort of soldiers taking on this soft concept of a rabbit. But the concept is much bigger than you'd normally expect a rabbit to be. So if you see conceptually, there's something about softness and warmth and whatever a rabbit might represent, in combination with a rainbow behind it and an angel above it, which says these people are idiots. These soldiers, and I'm sure that's what Steinberg felt. I mean, my guess is he's he very much fit into an anti-military, having experienced what he did in his life. So he's trying to show what a small part, not the impact, but the sort of emotional aspect of what militarism might be relative to how we would view the bigger part of our lives. It's interesting that the angel is we were talking about this before, is hand drawn, but looks very much like one of his stamps in a way. So obviously it would reflect that. But everything in this is hand drawn and colored in, and therefore, I don't know, has a little bit more meaning to me because he took the time to draw it and color it in all aspects.
So if you just use your hand and cover over the angel, how empty the space becomes. And with the single small angel, it fills that space up, and the entire drawing then creates a wonderful sense of balance. Let's look at the general A. There's a general B as well that appears in one of the books we have. This, I think, was done as part of an anti-Vietnam portfolio, and it is basically rubber stamps and watercolor. Let me just, and it's almost impossible to see except standing in front of the piece. Actually, the entire figure of the angel is pasted down. It's been cut out, and it has been made by using the various rubber stamps that were part of the 250 rubber stamps that he gave to Yale. So think back about having your own difficulties, either with immigration or customs, and why not just make your own stamp your documents, and move ahead. He did a number of them of figures, the like angel, whatever figure animal on his helmet, same thing, it's a rubber stamp. The eyeballs, the outlines are all rubber stamps, the epaulets, rubber stamps. And then just to finish it off, his ribbons, when you look carefully, are actually a rubber stamp of dental charts. Steinberg had very bad teeth, apparently, and and a lot of pain from them. So instead of having ribbons for our general, he has a collection of teeth x-rays or drawings. So how does it read to you, Rusty, as a statement visually and otherwise?
Oh, it could be his dentist he's afraid of. I think it's incredible that every line in this work is a stamp. I mean, you would immediately think, oh, he drew those lines around the hat and the face and the head. They're all stamps, and he's able to, without, I don't know, he's able to put them all together once again with this concept of perspective. It's the architect in him that knows where these lines need to be, and how you can do it, not by drawing, but by putting a stamp. And it's quite unique. And of course, the buttons and everything on the dress itself, or on the coat itself, are I'm sure fun for him in a lot of ways. There's nothing sort of too special about it other than the dental things. But the face is pretty amazing. I mean, it's a bulldog face, and it's flat, and yet it's not. So it's it makes you smile, and then you get into it and you think, well, you know what? Somebody on the street today who may not be here legally may be facing the same face for reasons that we wish didn't happen.
Well said. Mara?
Okay. Given that I was in high school and college during the years of Vietnam, this is General Westmoreland to me. I mean, it's got that, again, the bulldog face, but that square jaw, the sort of military precision of putting down the lines that make the lines in the general's face, the square jaw, the serious lines that men get at a certain age. And I don't know if you remember Westmoreland, but he did have one of those square squat faces. I mean, that was just him. The introduction of that light color again in just the perfect hint of khaki is masterful. Masterful. It's the only color he's introduced, and it's just masterful. And the bat, the almost Dracula image as the centerpiece of the hat, the blood-sucking, Dracula. It's very much an anti-war poster for me. It's very much of that period. It's very powerful.
So I suggest I just went to my phone to Google and bring up a picture of Westmoreland, and there is the square jaw, and then he has all the ribbons imaginable, not dental charts, but that's a wonderful indication of where we might look for some of his inspiration for this. So let's move to the last piece and to a kind of symphony of stamps, if you will. He apparently was invited for an exhibition at Betty Parsons' gallery, who was instrumental in sharing his work for many, many years. And it's hard to tell from the reproduction on the screen, but the Parsons word is a rectangle. It's on a rectangle, which he may well underneath it have misspelled. So he simply did it over again and pasted it on top. So there's an incredible comfort that he feels with what other people would say, oh, he just had a mistake. Why didn't he do a new one or something? No reason to, just paste over. So I'd love to sort of end with Steinberg, as we began with Steinberg, with each of the three of you speaking a bit about it. Caroline, if you'd begin.
I mean, this just reads like a self-portrait of the artist at his bench, and all his little pieces laid out, and these beautiful little collections of his stamps, and then just saying, I mean, he just point blank, this is me making stuff for this exhibition. And it's quite fun and lovely. I mean, it's enjoyable, all the different stamps he's using and how he integrates both him and the gallery he's sending these off to.
Mara?
Well, it does remind me of the M.C. Escher. I mean, he's drawing his table, he's drawing his implements, he's drawing himself. So it's a comment on the artistic process. You're not just his studio. He's creating it with us as we're looking and viewing the poster.
And Rusty?
It reminds me a little of Sam Bach's recent exhibition, where he used his paints and his paint brushes and things as actors, as participants in the paintings he created. And Steinberg's done the same thing here. He's represented the various aspects of creation, the things that he uses in a self-portrait. And obviously, that's him with making a line, taking a dot for a walk, if you will. So it's a wonderfully creative, and the name Steinberg, all the different aspects of how the lines might work, just a wonderful creative representation.
So let me share a quote, not from Brother Thomas, but from Abraham Joshua Heschel, which is another favorite. He says that philosophy may be defined as the art of asking the right questions. Awareness of problems outlives all solutions. The answers are questions in disguise, every new answer giving rise to a new question. And what I would do is just substitute the notion for itself, namely philosophy as art, in his case. And Steinberg was, in so many ways, at least for me in experiencing his works, the artist of questions, as Sam is in a very different way. But Steinberg is questioning the nature of art itself, and as art as a vehicle for us to understand our lives through his questions. It's just an absolute joy and pleasure to be surrounded by his work, to be able to share his work. Grateful to the three of you for helping to make this possible, and thank everyone for tuning in.